Wicked has a visual problem, but it's not what you think. If you've been following the online conversations, you'll know many are pointing to the desaturation, but that's not right. The movie does have a colorful palette, so why does something feel so off? While most discussions stop at desaturated, I argue that there's a deeper, more complex issue here at play. It's not one problem, but a combination of visual factors, each amplifying the other and resulting in what I consider a visual disaster. But all of these factors eventually affect one of the most important assets of visual storytelling, and that's the color palette. There are a few things that makes a difference between a thought about color palette and a messy one. Because movies have various scenes, unlike paintings or even photos, they can have more than one palette, but they all have to be connected to each other in a meaningful way to create the grand palette of the movie. This is Wicked's palette, and as you can see, it's very messy. There are several reasons why the palette doesn't work, and it starts with the rule of contrast and affinity. This rule makes every decision more precise and better suiting for the visuals of a scene. If a scene needs tension, we create contrast. If it's a calmer one, we create it with more affinity. Color contrast can be created in 3 different ways. First, by brightness of a color, second, by the intensity of a color, and third, by putting different colors together. For brightness, putting different shades of one or different colors together creates the desired contrast. On the other hand, if we put the same shades of different colors, we create a more harmonious look. Same thing goes with putting colors in 2 sections of cool tones and warm tones. Choosing only warm or cool tones creates more affinity than putting colors of each group in front of each other. Through this principle, the director tells their story with the visual elements. Now let's go back to Wicked. The primary colors in the palette of Wicked are green and pink, which are complementary of each other. This has a very deep storytelling device within it about the contrast of the 2 characters. But the movie ignores green until the 3rd act in the Emerald City. So the contrast between Elphaba and Glinda isn't shown through any visual cues. The dominant colors of the movie itself become mostly yellows, blues, and pinks. It's this dominance that creates the first problem. Most of the sets are colored in either yellow or brown, while all the students wear blue. This makes a messy palette with colors that don't exactly complement each other, especially if the 2 characters are dressed in warm colors with light tones and the other in cool colors with light tones. Then the sets should be in more saturated colors or in darker tones. Let's look at the scene where Glinda gives Elphaba the famous hat in the room. The colors in this shot are mostly warm tones except for Elphaba's skin. And since Glinda's palette consists of pink and yellow, she's practically a part of the set. So not only her pink dress doesn't pop out, the scene also lacks the needed contrast to show off the beautiful dress. So most of the scenes just blend Glinda into the sets, although she's dressing in a different color from the others in school who are dressed in blue. Another example is at the Ozdust ballroom, which the same thing happens with the extras who are dancing. This room is dark and everyone else is also dressed in dark clothing. Another example of the colors that don't go well together is the fact that the students are wearing blue. And because they are sticking to making Glinda look different in terms of the color of her clothing, then the movie loses a big chance of dressing up her in cooler tones such as blue or even purple. A problem I personally have with Glinda's palette is her monochromatic outfits, which comes from the fact that she has a warmer palette. The costume designer of Wicked did an absolute masterpiece for this movie, and the Oscar was well deserved. but the choice of dressing Glinda in only pink, I believe, comes from the director more than the costume designer. A choice that ultimately was something that lost a very important element of storytelling. Glinda is a multi-layered character who has both sides just like any other gray character. So it's a shame since blue or purple could have made Glinda much better on the storytelling level. Glinda has some traits that are similar to Elphaba, but the two are mostly different. So going back and forth between cool and warm tones could have marked these differences and similarities. In the Broadway show, there's another color in Glinda's palette, which is blue, something that Elphaba also wears in the movie as well. The cool color works so well because not only it creates a more harmonious duo in front of Elphaba's skin color, but it also shows a contrasting side of her as well. By not using pink all the time, the importance of the color actually would have increased, and every time we had pink, we could witness peak Glinda. The most important Glinda moment is the scene where she sings Popular, and everything in that scene is helping her quirkiness. This is the kind of moment she needed to be shining in pink. This is something to be kept in mind. Creating a cohesive palette requires a goal in mind to visualize the theme of the story. Is it heartwarming and friendly, or is it dark and gritty, or a mix of both? But that's not what happens in Wicked, because while the sets are gorgeously designed and the clothes are stunningly beautiful, the choice of color in each doesn't complement the other. So how could they create a cohesive palette? This is where color schemes come into play. According to Almighty Google, a color scheme is a combination of colors used together in a design or artwork to create a specific aesthetic or evoke a particular mode. We have complementary colors, which in short consist of one primary color and the color resulting from mixing the two other primary colors. For example, green and red, which by creating different shades of red, we get pink. There are a lot of schemes that can consist of a number of colors, but the importance of it can be reminded to you with this famous photo of a color hitting differently while it's positioned in the center of a darker and a lighter shade of itself. The same effect happens when two colors are next to each other. The color that's taking a bigger area becomes a catalyst and the smaller one becomes susceptible. This is why Wicked looks so bland, because the catalysts are mostly very bright and pastel colors. Although they could help a saturated or a dark color pop out, the only dark shade is the blue uniforms. The desaturation problem roots in this point. Because the dominant colors are pastels and bright ones, the smaller portions look mostly dark instead of saturated. It neither complements Elphaba's green or Glinda's pink in the right way. The yellow is too bright, so everything else just becomes really dark. And if they would make the yellow just a bit more saturated, you could see a shift in everything. Going back to the problem with the set design, I think the choice of yellow was something that should have been more considered. Not as a sole decision for the set designer, but as what emotions they wanted to convey while being placed next to the costumes as well as other visual cues. Let's do a scene analysis. In the beginning sequence where Glinda arrives at Munchkinland, there are plenty of colors, and yet the scene doesn't seem colorful at all. It's not just about having a colorful palette, it's about making sure the palette has colors that act as we want them to. Why doesn't this scene in Munchkinland seem colorful? The reason why this scene in Munchkinland doesn't seem that colorful is because nothing has the required hue contrast. Almost everyone in Munchkinland is wearing a warm color, which makes a mash of browns and yellows and oranges. What does the scene lack? The cooler and brighter tones. Compare this to the original Wizard of Oz and you'll find a lot of cool colors, including the iconic dress of Dorothy. And that's when you'll realize that the hue contrast is much better planned in here. The green of the grasses in the original is also part of the set, which is way further in Wicked, and it doesn't blend into the shots of the Munchkinland. If you take a look at this shot of the yellow brick road of Wicked, there's also another problem. This yellow brick road is placed next to a color which is not only from the shades of yellow itself, but it's also very bright. Compare this again to the original movie and you'll see that they chose a much darker color that makes the road stand out. So the problem becomes this. There is no subtext meaning hidden in the palette beyond the two main characters with their associated colors. As a result, blue that could have had a great storytelling purpose in the movie becomes a dominant color with no purpose. But the choice of color is heavily affected with my next point. It can literally change the colors, and it's something that you see consistently in Wicked, and that's lighting. There's a certain amount of light each color can reflect. That's how we actually see color. But the colors themselves can change in different lightings. Believe it or not, the colors in Wicked do change a lot. The students' uniforms is a strong example. This is a scene from the beginning of the movie. This is when Elphaba is leaving for the Emerald City. This is moments after that, but in a different shot. When it comes to colors, white has the most reflection while black has the least amount. Then all the other colors create a spectrum with each one having a different wavelength. At the top, the color red reflects the most light and green somewhere lower in the spectrum. And why does this matter? Because Glinda is already designed with a palette that reflects more color than Elphaba. With Glinda, there is white skin, blonde hair, and bright pink outfits, which is a variation of red. And then we have Elphaba, who has green skin, blue, and black outfits. This contrast means that while lighting a scene, Glinda looks naturally brighter than Elphaba. Another great importance becomes this. Because in Wicked, they mostly used moderated lighting, and it's supposed to convey the natural sources of light, which are mostly windows, and because they wanted an overall lighting that could be used in various shots with different camera angles and heights, there was something at risk. Either Elphaba would be underlit or Glinda would be overlit. This creates an effect called overexposure or underexposure, something that would hit yet another lighting elements, highlights and shadows. Simply put, highlights are the bright parts of a picture, while the darker ones create shadows. Underexposure and overexposure decreases contrast in highlights and shadows, which can make a face flat or make a body blend into the background, but most importantly, it can change how we see a color. Let's examine some scenes in here. The first scene, which I have the biggest problem with, is the library dance sequence. The library is designed to have lots of windows, a choice that actually didn't work. In this shot, Glinda is completely blended into the background because the source of light facing the lens creates a huge part of the shot overexposed. That's why if you look at the behind the scenes photos of the library, it actually looks much more vibrant because the colors have changed due to this effect. Because the cinematic camera lenses are created to absorb more light, what the set photographer has captured differentiates from the movie look itself. In the movie, the shots that have smaller windows look actually better than the ones facing the big two entries. Look at Fiero's jacket in this shot comparing to this shot, which is filled with lens flare and overexposed areas, and the jacket looks way less vibrant than it should. In this sequence, Glinda's dress, which is bright pink, looks mostly washed out because of the overexposure of the windows. Right before Buck asks Nessa Rose out, when Fiyero and Glinda sing together alone, there's a moment that we almost don't see their faces because of the overexposure. There are also moments of underexposure for Elphaba right happening at the Ozdas ballroom. When Elphaba is entering the room, the top lighting doesn't create enough highlights and shadows, so she just blends into the background, which is almost the same color as her skin. The solution could have been easy. They could have chosen brighter blues or darker blues, and they also should have used a key light on her face to light her face better. Compare this poorly lit shot to this one happening moments after that, and you could see how the lighting makes such a great difference for showing Elphaba's features. These problems become less in the third act of the movie though, which happens in the Emerald City. For example, while meeting the wizard, Elphaba and Glinda are both lit from the top, just like the Ozdas ball, but this time it is done in a way to create the needed highlights and shadows on their faces. That's all I have for this video, but if you enjoy more visual storytelling content, make sure to check out this video on La La Land's colors, and I'll see you next time.